morning is from Leviticus. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and ye shall be my people, said Jehovah. I am Jehovah your God, who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that ye should not be their bondmen, and I have broken the bars of your yoke, and made you go upright. And from the book of Matthew, the Lord said, Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading, the hearing, the understanding, and the living of his holy word. Now, before we start on our examination of the Eightfold Path and the journey that we take in the Christian world, I want to just make mention of these two passages. For in the passage from Leviticus, he says that God says, I will walk among you. And he's talking about bringing them forth out of Egypt, but also the Lord brought them into Egypt. And Egypt represents a time of learning. So when there was famine in the land and Jacob and his family first went to Egypt, that learning, or that they were fed by the grain that was there, they were fed and they were nurtured, and they became a great people. And then at a certain time, they became slaves to the Egyptians because there were too many of them, for Joseph was no longer there, he had passed away, and though all of the Egyptians became slaves, and they were under the yoke of the Egyptian leaders. And the correspondence of that is that we can go into a time of learning that we need, and it greatly enhances us and makes us feel more connected to the world. But yet, if we become a slave to that, a slave to information, then we need to be brought away from that. We need to get out from under that and become an upright person. And I think that this balances so nicely with the passage from Matthew, because Jesus invites us to learn of him. But when he says to learn of him, he says, I am meek and lowly in heart. So what he wants to teach us is humility and love. That when we learn of him, we learn to live a life of the heart, and we will find rest for our souls. So there's an appropriate time in our lives to learn things, and then the time to come out from that lifting up of information is the most important thing, to recognize that a life of love is the most important thing. So, as I mentioned with the children, with the breathing exercise, it was such a lovely correspondence to how the Lord leads us when we do not lead ourselves. So when we are breathing, we're letting the Lord lead us. When we're resting, when we're calm. When you get anxious, you hold your breath, you hold it in. You're somehow resisting that natural flow. And Swedenborg has an interesting take on this that he put in the book Heaven and Hell. He says, one person can live like another in outward form, as long as there's an inward acknowledgement of the divine and intent to serve our neighbor. It is not hard to follow the path to heaven, as many people believe. The only difficulty is finding the power to resist love for ourselves and love of the world, and preventing those loves from taking control, since they are the source of all evils. The fact that it is not so hard as people believe is what is meant by these words of the Lord, learn of me that I am gentle and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden light. The reason the Lord's yoke is easy and his burden is light is that to the extent that we resist evils that well up from love of ourselves and the world, we are led by the Lord and not ourselves. Then the Lord resists all those things within us and removes them. I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Who is the person who makes your life most difficult? It is you. It is the part of you that is resisting the Lord leading you. It's the holding of the breath. It's the resisting of the love that wants to flow through you. So when we think of that breathing exercise, if we could think about it as breathing in the willingness, the possibility, the potential, the creative energy to find what our love can be. We breathe in all of that wonderful potential. We hold it only long enough to let it kind of clarify into how it will be. And then we let that love out into the world on the count of 3. So that breathing exercise is a correspondence of how we can let love in, share love. And that is the most important thing. And I want to say that as we start to look into the Eightfold Path, what we're going to find is that it is the golden rule in action. They came up with 8 ways to focus that. In our tradition, we have love, wisdom, and use. That love is the essence of life and the divine. Wisdom is the understanding that love is the essence of life and the divine. And use is the action of living that understanding that love is the essence of life and the divine in the world. Now, there are 8, which I have up here, and I'll point to it here. The 2 that have to do with love are right view and right intention. The 3 that have to do with wisdom are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And the ones that have to do with use are right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. So I thought that rather than trying to shrink down what is many people's lifelong journey with the Buddhist tradition to come to an understanding of the Eightfold Path, that we would use a lovely little resource on YouTube called Buddha Bits. Very succinctly will explain to us, we'll just do the first 2 for starters, and then we'll talk about how it corresponds to love.
You know about the Eightfold Path, but do you know what it is all about? What does it mean for you? Before you proceed, you have to have the right view. Buddhism's Eightfold Path isn't exactly a path. It is a series of 8 types of actions that a person should undertake in order to free himself or herself from suffering. And while the Eightfold Path has 8 factors listed from 1 to 8, that doesn't mean each action should be completed before moving to the next. If possible, one should try to undertake all of the actions at the same time. Of course, you still need a starting point. And that is right view. This is sometimes translated as right perspective, right outlook, or right understanding. You have to know where you're coming from and know where you want to go. Knowing this will help you achieve your goal. That is why right view tops the list of the Eightfold Path. Once you have the right perspective, it makes it easier for the other pieces to fall into place. What is the right view then? In short, it is understanding and accepting the 4 Noble Truths. With that knowledge, you can then begin your journey. Right view is the first part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more about the Eightfold Path, subscribe to Buddha Bits and like us on Facebook. You're on the Eightfold Path. You understand where the path leads, but are you willing to do what it takes? Do you have the resolve to keep going? Buddhism's Eightfold Path isn't exactly a path. It is a series of 8 types of actions that a person should undertake in order to free himself or herself from suffering. And while the Eightfold Path has 8 factors listed from 1 to 8, that doesn't mean each action should be completed before moving to the next. If possible, one should try to undertake all of the actions at the same time. Traveling the Eightfold Path requires wisdom. The first aspect of this is having the right view or perspective. You understand the 4 noble truths. You may see the right view, but are you willing to accept it? Are you ready to change your behavior? To do what it takes in order to become happy? For some people, the changes may be simple. For others, they may prove challenging. If you are willing to accept this, you are ready to proceed down the Eightfold Path. Right intention is the second part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Buddha Bits.
So where Swedenborg would talk about just intention, simply having the right intention, they're talking about having the right view, because you can have intentions that are headed down a path of selfishness or a path of self-aggrandizement or self-punishment. That there are many ways that we can think that we are having the right perspective, but what we need to identify is that our perspective is loving. Our perspective is humble. Our perspective is headed in the direction of where God would have us go on the path to heaven. So the way I see them using this in the Eightfold Path is they're saying, examine your view of the world first, and then examine the intention or the desire that you have to move in that direction. And that's the first 2 steps of the Eightfold Path. And you'll notice, interestingly, that they divide them up with the colors the same way I was explaining that these 2 are love and these 3 are wisdom and these 3 are usefulness, that they're using those same colors so that they're seeing a divide in the same way. And I'd like to just leave an opportunity, from what you've seen so far, do you see that they're very similar, that there's not a big difference between what they're calling right view and right intention and what we call examining your loves, getting your loves in the right order. It's different language, and it's a different system of belief, and it came from a different part of the world, but in many ways, it is one of the ways I determine whether I think something is kind of universal truth, is if you keep finding it popping up in different places, because God didn't leave the whole eastern part of the world, the whole Asian continent, out of God's wisdom and inspiration simply because they didn't know about Christ. That different teachers all around the world have brought God's message of love and how to live a good life in many different ways. And this is one of the ways that before I came back to Christianity, was finding an awful lot of wisdom in, because it talks very concretely about how to live your life. Simply the mindfulness piece, teaching you how to breathe to calm yourself down. And there's some really practical techniques with meditation and mindfulness and wonderful walking meditations. There's all kinds of things that the Buddhists have offered to the world to give us practical techniques. And I don't know about you, but somehow sitting down with the Green 30 is just not enough of a practice to bring to life. It has to be translated, just as there's many centuries of Buddhist teaching, and this is 3 minutes each on the path. So we're getting a very quick version, but I see a lot of parallels to Swedenborg's writings. So let's go on to right speech. What did it do? If anybody wants to volunteer to be the tech person, I'm taking volunteers. There we go.
What to say, what to say. Words carry more weight than we often
I
realize.
think I meant that.
They can get us into trouble if we're not careful. And that is what right speech is all about. The first two aspects of the Eightfold Path, right view and right intention, were concerned with wisdom. With right speech, we move toward action, ethical behavior to be more specific. If you aren't careful, words can get you into trouble, and that can lead to unhappiness. That is why Buddhists try to take extra care when talking. At the most basic level, right speech means refraining from telling lies, one of the 5 precepts. However, right speech is more involved. Have you ever spoken harsh words, then later regretted it? Gossiped about someone, only to find out later the gossip wasn't true? Avoiding these things will keep you out of trouble. That is what is meant by right speech. Taking extra care not to insult or hurt others with your speech helps maintain a peaceful existence for you and for others. Some Buddhists take right speech even further. They avoid idle talk. They believe that if your speech doesn't contribute anything useful, then perhaps it should be kept to oneself. The Eightfold Path is a guideline, not a set of commandments. As you follow the Eightfold Path, you will have to decide for yourself what is appropriate. Right speech is the third part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Buddhist. At Buddhist. Just do it? Well, maybe not. Do the right thing. Yes, of course, if you know what that is. Don't do bad things? Obviously. As we follow the Eightfold Path, with right speech, we try to be more careful about what we say. Of course, that isn't enough. We have to take care in what we do. That is where right action comes in. It is the second part of the Eightfold Path concerned with ethical behavior. If you watch the Buddhist video on the 5 precepts, you can probably guess what right action means. At the top of the list, of course, is abstaining from taking life. Clearly this refers to human life. However, for many Buddhists, this also means abstaining from taking the life of any sentient being. As a result, many Buddhists choose to be vegetarians. Right action also means not stealing. While stealing may get you in trouble with the law, it will probably also impact your inner peacefulness. Sexual misconduct, such as rape, pedophilia, and adultery, are also to be abstained from. In general, right action also means being mindful that your sexual behavior is not harmful to yourself or to others. For the most part, right action probably mirrors the law and reflects common sense. However, guided by right view and right intention, you may decide that right action may go further than the examples just mentioned. Right action is the 4th part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Buddhist. What do you do for a living? Do you feel it is fulfilling? Can you say, I make an honest living? Right livelihood is the third part of the Eightfold Path concerned with ethical behavior. Of course, right livelihood involves earning your living honestly and ethically, but for Buddhists, it goes beyond that. There are several types of businesses that should be avoided. The most obvious are businesses that result in harm to people. For example, the manufacture and sale of weapons or poisons, things that kill. And since Buddhists are encouraged to abstain from intoxicants, it follows that they not engage in businesses that sell or manufacture addictive drugs or alcoholic drinks. Businesses that involve the selling or trading of human beings, such as slavery or prostitution, should also be avoided. And while right livelihood is a guideline, not a commandment, many Buddhists also refrain from engaging in businesses related to the killing of animals. Some Buddhists go one step further. They choose careers that help others, such as teaching, medicine, or working in charities. Right livelihood is the fifth part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Buddha Bits. Temptation.
We look back at the Dharma wheel again. We looked at right view and right intention as being how our heart is engaged in what it is that we want to do in the world, and that we have a view of heading towards the good and the true, and we set our intention and our energy towards that. These three that we just looked at, speech, action, and livelihood, are about how we use our minds to direct that intention along the path, that we say things or don't say things, how we act, and how we spend our days earning our living. And I want to make a particular note on right speech, because very often when we are listening to someone, we are spending our time looking like we're listening when we're actually planning what we're going to say. We're planning how we can get our point across, or our thoughts or experience we've had that's similar. And there is a huge difference when you listen as if you want to hear. And that is called active listening. And by being quiet, that from the Buddhist path, the thought of just if it doesn't add anything, you don't need to say it. In that silence, you may find a deeper sharing comes from the person who is speaking, because you have allowed that silence to be that respect and that curiosity and that openness to that other person. So I think that in the modern day, we could use a lot more silence and listening with one another, and that's a lesson of right speech that I think is very important for us to hear, especially in America today. And a nice little three things to remember if you're thinking of saying something. Is it kind? Is it true? And is it necessary? And most often you'll find by the time you get to necessary, it's not. And you can listen a little longer, maybe let a little pregnant pause until the other person you're with realizes, oh, you really do want to hear what I have to say. So these, I think, relate very well to Swedenborg's teachings about how our understanding is wisdom from God coming into our minds to guide us in what we say, how we act, and how we spend our time with our livelihood. And the last three, effort, concentration, and mindfulness, are deeper. These are, we very often, I think, when I first was reading Swedenborg, if I had looked at this, I would have had, oh, this has to do with intention, and this has to do with wisdom, and I don't know what all these other ones are. But this has to do with the way you use your attention, what you concentrate on, what things you put effort into, and how you are mindful of your life and your impact on others. So let's listen to the last three.
Abounds. Sometimes it is easy to forget. and to stray just a little. Right effort means being diligent. As we follow the Eightfold Path, we have to be persistent. We have to remind ourselves to do the good things and to avoid the bad things. It is important to look for good things and things with good potential. Nurture those. Sometimes bad behavior or habits slip back into our routine. We have to be persistent in getting rid of them. The sooner we notice them, the easier it will be to keep them from getting out of control. Right effort is the first part of the Eightfold Path concerned with concentration. The first two parts of the Eightfold Path help point us in the right direction. The next three parts require modifying our behavior to help minimize actions that might cause pain and unhappiness for ourselves and others. Concentration is important to strengthen our will and our understanding. Right effort is the sixth part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Regeneration. I'm sorry, what did you say? What did I say? Or what was I thinking? I guess I should be more mindful. In this fast-paced information age, it is easy to get distracted and lose focus. We can lose touch not only with what is happening around us, but with our own thoughts as well. Sometimes we may think we understand what is happening around us, but don't realize that our internal thought filters have kept us from really seeing what is going on. Mindfulness sounds easy enough, but in practice, it is often quite difficult because we may not even be aware of our thought filters. This is where the practice of meditation can be helpful. Through meditation, we learn about how our mind works by actually watching it as it works. Right mindfulness is the second part of the Eightfold Path, concerned with concentration. Together with right effort and right concentration, it involves knowing ourselves and our surroundings better. Right mindfulness is the seventh part of the Eightfold Path. To learn more, watch more videos at Regeneration.
Being mindful of the time. You won't watch the other one on concentration. And I'm curious why in this one it had concentration and the mindfulness in a different order. I don't know where the resources were for each, but I think that mindfulness is a good place to end up, because mindfulness is being in the present moment, being where we are, accepting what we are feeling and thinking and how we are spending our time. And mindfulness is the kind of thing that reminds you, as you're living each present moment, that as you breathe in and breathe out, God is with you. God, the divine, lives in each one of us. Just as when we did the meditation experience with the children, and that we are like fish in water. We are living in God, and God is living in us. And it's up to us to just simply open all the channels. If you think of that as the Eightfold Path as being, they talked about doing it all at once. You're opening all the channels, all the chakras, all of the ways in which you perceive the world are open, so that you're allowing the world to show you how the divine is working in your life.